So, what is synesthesia? Synesthesia is the mixing of perceptions. Um, Often, it's the brain sort of adding additional perceptual attributes to detection of stimuli that don't have inherent in them those specific attributes. So, it can be crossing of senses. For example, you could see, for example, sound. Like you might hear a particular frequency of sound and see some sort of perturbation, in the environment. You have a visual perception that's associated with the sound. Charles Birchfield's a wonderful artist who painted a lot of kind of natural scenes where it appears that the sounds that are being made actually have a visual impact on his perceptual experience of the landscape. And synesthesia sometimes can occur sort of within a modality, a sensory modality, like, for example, within vision. And one that we encounter a lot, or have encountered a lot through outreach when we go take brains into public schools, etc., is one called grapheme color synesthesia. Grapheme is like a letter or a number, and there's a very specific portion of the brain that's involved on the left side in the temporal lobe in the recognition of letters and numbers, and has to develop, of course, with experience. And right near that, in fact, adjacent to that region in the left temporal lobe, is an area called V4, which is an important visual region that's essential for the detection of color, among other things. Actually, there's a famous chapter in a book by Oliver Sacks where he describes an artist's experience after they lost through injury V4 in both the left and right hemispheres of their brain, and how color drained out of their perceptual experience. This, again, is a circumstance where the specialized cells in the eye, we're going to see, that are called cone photoreceptors, that can discriminate different wavelengths of incoming electromagnetic radiation and allow for perception of color. They are functioning fine. There's no change to the cones, but the networking in the brain through which that information is distributed, V4 is an essential node in a distributed network that allows for the extraction and experience perceptually of color in our world. And with a lot of kids, we note, actually more than you might expect, the younger the grade, the more you encounter this. They have what's called grapheme color synesthesia, which means that when you show them like the letter T, they'll tell you T's are green. Even if you present it like in like black lettering on a white background, they'll have a perceptual experience of it being green. And what's fascinating about synesthetics, people who have synesthesia, is that they often disagree about the color that's associated if they have grapheme color synesthesia. Some will say, no, T's are blue or something like that. But we often, if a kid in a fourth grade class says, no, T's are green, like, they're often surprised that other individuals aren't, experiencing the world as they are perceptually. We'll hold up a sheet. We can draw like, let's say, a whole bunch of L's, which maybe they'll say the L's are red, and we'll hide a few T's amongst the L's. And if they're synesthetic, if they really do have grapheme color synesthesia, and the T is green and the L's are red, well, they can very, very quickly, count and tell you how many T's there are hidden in that, field of red L's. While, if you don't have grapheme color synesthesia, you have to do a visual search. It's more laborious and it takes more time. And, what's fascinating about synesthesia, and there's more information below on this page, is how some research has shown that if you put very young children, very young infants into like a functional magnetic resonance imaging scanner, right? And you're going to you're gonna look at areas of the brain that are active in response to stimuli that you present. If you present an image of a child's mother, for example, you will see areas of the visual cortex, the occipital lobe and into the temporal lobe, active in response to that image of the mother's face. But in the infant, 6 months old, let's say, you will also see, far more distribution of activity in the brain, areas that are involved ultimately in somatosensations, sensations of the body, olfaction, smell, gustation, taste, all these different areas, distributed areas, actually. It's a very multimodal, potentially, experience. You can't ask the baby, but it gets distributed in many places in the brain. But then by about 24 months or so, if you show that image, the distribution is far more selective along networks that are associated with, visually processing the image and recognizing, for example, the mother's face. So it's possible that we all sort of, begin with a far more synesthetic, multimodal sort of experience of the world, and then we hone down and, sort of selectively distribute inputs coming through the various, afferents along specific networks in the brain through experience. But this may occur, to differing degrees in different individuals.